Hi there, welcome to 5 Minute Psychology, the vlog/podcast dedicated to promoting fun facts and findings in psychology in a quick and hopefully concise fashion. Today we're going to talk about art. Now, usually I only spend the last minute or so talking about art, but today it's going to be the whole podcast. Why? Because it's amazing. So I've recently been co-authoring a review of culture in psychology for an organizational journal. And so a lot of these ideas have been sort of bouncing back and forth in my head. So I'd like to start off by asking a question. Imagine that there is a fish right here where my hand is. And then imagine that there are 3 fish sort of swimming over here where my other hand is kind of moving. Okay? Can you picture that in your head? You know what? I'll show you an image. See that? Imagine that. What's happening in that? Think about it for a second. Just look at it and describe it in your head. What's happening? What are the fish doing? Think about the words that you're using. So this kind of image is the kind of image that psychologists use to tease out subtle differences between cultures. Now, you may think everyone describes the image the same way, but there's actually a really subtle difference between how East Asians describe it and how Americans describe it, or Western Europeans. So we have this tendency as individualists, which is what psychologists call us, to think that that first fish, or describe that first fish as leading the pack, right? He's going down his own path, or she's going down her own path, and the rest of the fish are followers. East Asians, on the other hand, psychologists tend to call them collectivists, tend to describe the image as, look at all of those other fish, right, who are chasing that first fish. Now, what's happening? Why is this important? And why are these things different? And does it matter? Well, it does matter because it reflects something very subtle and important in how cultures work. And that is whether or not we think that individuals are the driving force, and if we should focus on individuals and what makes them special, or collectives, right? Big groups are more important, and they're the things that we should focus on. So for the Americans and Western Europeans, they're describing an individual fish as leading, right? There's an importance of the individual's goals and values above those of the group. Whereas for collectivists, they're saying, hey, no, all of these other fish are causing something to happen, right? It's the group that is making something happen, not the individual. We should focus on the group's norms and the group's values and the group's ideas. That's really crazy and really cool. So there's another way that this is subtly reflected that is really, really cool. Some researchers went back and they looked at artwork, right? And they looked particularly at like portraits. And what they found was that in sort of individualist cultures, again, so Western Europe and America, portraits, the people in the portrait tended to be sort of larger and closer. The face took up more of the canvas, right? They focused on that individual. Whereas lots of famous paintings throughout Eastern Asian history tend to have portraits with people that are farther back. There's more scenery. There's more surrounding. There's more other people. There's less of a focus on the individual. Fascinating, right? But that's just artwork, right? That's just how someone paints the world, right? Maybe that reflects how they see it. Maybe it doesn't. However, you know where else we see this? In photos on Facebook and social media. So individualists have a tendency to take photos that are closer and to take up more of their image, whereas sort of East Asian and collectivist cultures have a tendency to take photos that are a little bit farther back, that put more emphasis on the setting or the group or what's around them. This is really cool stuff. This is really fascinating. Now, I want to stress that just because you're from one culture or another does not mean you're individualist or collectivist. We all exist sort of on a spectrum, and it turns out we can sort of prime people to think more individualist or more collectivist. And there are certain mini or subcultures that are also sort of more individualist or collectivist. So for instance, some people argue that like Protestantism is a little bit more individualist, whereas sort of Catholicism is more collectivist. Or sometimes people argue that the Northeast might be considered slightly more individualist, whereas sort of states like Utah or sort of more religious areas in sort of the South or the West or the Midwest tend to have slightly more collectivist values. These are really fascinating ideas that like sort of go back and forth. Okay, so that was 5 Minute Psychology for today, just giving you a little hint of something fun, and we'll talk more about it next time. If you enjoyed this, make sure you keep following. You can follow on the SoundCloud 5 Minute Psychology or my YouTube 5 Minute Psychology, or check out my website. The link will be pasted below. All right, see you later.